y'all. I hope you're having a great day. Listen, today's video is going to be a personal story or one of my life lessons I learned about a financial crisis where we lost everything and how we survived and are still standing. So I just want to jump right in. Let's just do it. Well, y'all, if you've seen any of my frugality videos, I have made mention of the fact that we've lost everything before. Actually, we've lost everything 2 times. So I want to share about the first one, what happened, what I learned from it, and all there is that was gleaned from it. So this was in 1996. We lived in Mobile, Alabama. My husband was in the insurance claims business. We'd been there almost 18 years, raised our kids there. And then in 1996, the company came in and told Butch, my husband, that they were going to close the Mobile office. And if he wanted a job, he's going to have to go to Nashville, Tennessee, where the home office was. So we tend to like to eat and pay our bills. So my oldest child had been at Auburn University for a couple years. My middle daughter was graduating high school that very May and had a cello scholarship to University of Alabama. And then my third child was just coming out of middle school, and that was the one that's going to be the most affected. So we loaded up and went on up there. We did not sell our house right away, so we rented a townhome, and that's what we did. Now, here's the thing. Back in those days, for health insurance, if you moved or went across state lines, you had to wait 90 days to live in a place, in a new situation, before your insurance would just transfer right over. So what they did was they offered you a rider, a 90-day rider, and it cost about $500, as I recall. You don't have to do it. You can just take your chances. So we made a very unwise decision. And that's what set this whole thing off. Well, you know, we were young. Our kids had never been sick. We had never been really hospitalized. I think one time I had for a surgery, but we thought we could do it, and we decided to trust God, okay? Now, I want to tell you, I want to make this point clear. Right away, if you try to manipulate God to do what it is you want instead of His will, then you may have a rough go of it. All right, so anyway, that was it. We decided not to do that, and we would just go about our merry way. All right, so we get up to Nashville. We're settling in. My son, going in the 9th grade, he decided that he wanted to play football. He had to have a sports physical to be able to play, and we had to go take care of that ourselves. So I found a doctor and took him up there, had all his records and all, and I'm sitting in the waiting room, and the doctor comes out and says, "Ms. Walker, we have a problem." I said, okay. Apparently, my son, who was 14, had a huge tumor or growth on his testicle. I'm like, what? This is the first I've heard of it. He never had said a word. And of course, I felt so much guilt, y'all, so much guilt. But being realistic, looking back on it, how many 14-year-old boys share their stuff with their mother? Long story short, within 2 hours, they had us downtown Nashville at Vanderbilt Medical Clinic. I was in an oncologist office. I walked under a sign coming in that said Cancer Center, and it's not even noon yet. So I called my husband, he met us down there. They examined him, they took scans and all the things. And then they called us back to I guess that's where they put up the x-rays on those light things to look at the scans, and also just basic x-rays. And they this very, very young oncologist. Not that I care if doctors are young or not. But anyway, he was an oncologist, and he just started pointing, and now this is this, and this is this, and we're going to do this. Don't worry. We'll check to make sure the cancer hasn't spread. See, that's the first time I heard anybody say cancer. I said, whoa. And he just kind of glazed right over it. And he says, because we're going to have to probably, ma'am, he's probably going to lose that testicle, maybe the other one. And we're going to have to start chemo, probably, I don't know. We'll get your protocol out, but first we got to have surgery. Now, at this point, I am so overwhelmed. When he said cancer and chemo, my legs just buckled and I fell. My husband caught me, fell to the floor. I just collapsed. And my husband looked at this guy and he said, I'm sorry, we need to sit down. Because we were standing in this little tiny room, this hallway, like, is where they were showing it to us. And as I look back, I kind of feel bad for that oncologist. You know, he was giving us a perfectly great clinical and forensic map of the situation. And it hadn't dawned on him that we were real people. So anyway, in 3 days, he had surgery. And they were not they were very doomsday. I'll put it that way. So here we are. We have Lyles and Vanderbilt. You know, actually, they did the surgery in Baptist Hospital down there. And now listen, we had moved in June. And this was like July, sometime in July. But we hadn't really plugged in yet. We were just getting settled. We'd visited a church or two, but we had not found a home. So my point is, I didn't have anybody to sit up that hospital with me and my husband. But what I did was I called my mom and dad. Dad was pastoring a church in Houston, and he had his church praying. I called my friends in Mobile. They were praying and all the things. But it was different sitting up there by myself. All right, so we went out to the waiting room once they took him back, and we prayed for him and all the things. He was scared to death. And we went out there and just sat. Well, it wasn't even 30 minutes, and somebody comes walking in. It was a big waiting room, walking all the way across the waiting room, and comes right up to us, and he says, "Are you the Walkers?" And I said, "Yes." And he was an older gentleman, and he had his Bible with him. And he said, "Can I share something with you?" He opened his Bible, and he read the passage of Scripture where Jesus healed the man that they lowered down in the roof, a hole in the roof, and he told him to take up his bed and walk. So that that's what he read. And then he said, "Take up your bed and walk." And he looked us in the eye and he said, "Your son will. He's going to come out of this. He's going to be all right." With all kinds of confidence. Now listen, I don't know who this guy is. I'm so overwhelmed, I can't even believe it. But here's the backstory. My dad, see, I grew up in Southern Kentucky. My dad pastored in several towns in Southern Kentucky, about 50 miles north of Nashville. So there was a wonderful man lived in a little bit north of Southern Kentucky that my dad had remained friends with. He was a guy. He was a huge influence in our lives up until then because he was a prayer warrior. But Dad had maintained a friendship with him. Oh, there's my clock singing. And so Dad had called him to pray. All right, so this guy's name was Tommy. Well, he said to my dad, "You know, I got a cousin in Nashville that has an interesting little ministry. He goes around to hospitals and prays for people in cancer wards and real situations like that." So that was what had happened. I did not know that. He was a delightful man. He stayed about 10 minutes, and we shook his hand and thanked him very much, and off he went. I thought he was a chaplain or something, being honest. Well, it wasn't but about another 30 minutes, and they called us over the intercom. "Will Butch and Linda Walker please come here? The doctor wants to talk to you." So we went over to this conference room, and the doctor was standing there. He pulls his mask down. He said, "I had to come out and talk to you." He says, "When I went to put my scalpel on the place we had marked to cut, when he went to cut," he said, "the tumor dissipated. It just gone." And he probed and probed and probed. He could not find it. But he was kind of apologetic. Meanwhile, I'm like, what in the, we're thunderstruck. What are you saying? And so then he says, we're going to go ahead with your permission and do some exploratory surgery, and just to make sure, we're going to try to find it. And I said, we just said, okay. And he went back in there. And we looked at each other, and Butch says, I believe we've just had a miracle. Thunderstruck. Y'all, they never did find it. He's 43 years old now. But they did tell us that it would probably come back and all this, but it never did. Never did. And we attribute it to the Lord. That's all we know to do. And when we went back to the recovery room, when he came out of surgery and he was awake, and he asked us what was the deal, and we told him. He looked very strange. He kind of teared up, and he looked and he said, so, there is a God. At first, I was a little bit offended. What do you mean there is a God? You were raised in my house. You know, blah, 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 blah. You know the word. But y'all, here's the thing. His faith was made real that day. You know why? Because it happened to him. It wasn't somebody else's testimony. It wasn't coming from the pulpit. It happened to him. That was one of my life lessons that day. Yeah. Okay. All right. So now my daughter, for the last couple of months, had been exhibiting some kind of, I don't know, colon situation like IBS or something. I had her to the doctors in Mobile, and they just said they did blood work and all that. So she's just stressed out because A, she's going to college, she's leaving all her friends, and she's moving out of her what she considered her hometown. Excuse me, my husband is mowing the grass, and you are getting to hear all about it right now. So anyway, but she was losing weight. She really couldn't keep anything down. We've already moved and everything, and we went by what they said in Mobile. So we just thought she was stressed out. So we loaded her up and took her to school, Alabama. Well, it wasn't a month, and we get a call from University of Alabama saying that our daughter's in the hospital, that she was bleeding out in her dorm room, and they called the 911. Oh my God. So I jump up. I went. Butch stayed there. And I jumped in the car. It's about a 4-hour drive. I tore down there. When I walked in that room, I didn't recognize my daughter. She was so gaunt, didn't even weigh 90 pounds. She's 5'8". I could not believe the change. All right, long story short, they finally did a colonoscopy, which in retrospect, I would have demanded in Mobile. But apparently they didn't like to scope girls her age. I don't know. And so what she had was Crohn's disease. She still has Crohn's disease, and she's 45. She's been managing it for many years. But y'all, she stayed in the hospital in Tuscaloosa a week, and she never did get back. We had to carry her home, and then she was in Vanderbilt for another week. So now I'm getting to the crux of the issue. We didn't have health insurance. Staggering medical bills. Staggering. I wasn't even working yet because I had to build my piano studio and get a job teaching piano. We decided to hunker down and do the best we could. So what I did was I just went to work. I was teaching piano in 3 different schools, different times of the day. I was doing after school teaching and class piano where I had a bunch at once. I was driving all over Nashville. I leave at 7 in the morning, come home at 8:30 at night. And I had about 80 students. So I kicked it. Now I'm gonna tell you, I did that for 3 years, and I will tell you, my health has never recovered. I already had the fibromyalgia diagnosis, but I went way off the deep end. I've never recovered from that time in my life. And my husband got after work jobs and all the things. We cashed out what we had saved up already. My husband was already in 20 years, so we had a fair amount saved in the 401k in the retirement. We cashed all our retirement out. We sold our house in Mobile, cashed all that out, paid that on it. We couldn't buy a house. We were broke. We sold everything we could. And then we had to walk through with nothing for years. But here's what we learned from it. Number one, God doesn't orchestrate things to tear up your life. You don't go through trauma and crisis because God says, I'm going to show you. That's not our loving God, and that's not what he does. But he does want to build in us some character. And listen, the way you do that is go through something. And we went through so much financial mess. We learned a lot. And we just put our nose to the grindstone. They ended up writing off a good bit of it, but the rest was still staggering. The next thing that we did, though, is this is 1996. So Dave Ramsey, the financial guy, he had his business set up in Nashville. He wasn't on the TV or radio or anything yet then. So we actually went to his classes and went through that financial thing together. And so we started with that, and that's what we did. Now, did I sit around and moan and groan about the first, that was 18 years into our marriage, how we just blew it and didn't have enough money saved and all the things. See, I had it in my head because we had this good 401k thing going with my husband's job that I didn't necessarily need to save too much because that was going to take care of it all. Well, that was stupid thinking, you know. So anyway, our life lessons we learned. I'll give you 3 words. Think it through before you make a decision. Any kind of decision, and pray then. And not be in such a hurry. And if you have any kind of little red flag come up in your spirit, don't do it. Just don't do it. So that we learned that. We learned that mistakes can be healed and you can go on. One of my prayers is always, Holy Spirit, heal our wounded hearts and give us what we need and the strength and health to do what you want us to do. And that's kind of how we looked at it. So we learned from that. And also, I don't know even what to tell you about that healing my son got. You know, they told him he'd probably never have children, whether they found the thing or not. And then he married a girl who struggled with endometriosis and everything. And they told her she probably would never have a child. So he's 43. So they have 3 children. Don't look past a miracle. You know, sometimes I think if Jesus Christ were to walk right in this front door, got so much going on or whatever that I wouldn't even know he's standing there. And that's kind of what happened. We didn't even we were distraught. And Psalm 3 says, I cried unto the Lord with my voice, and he heard me out of his holy hill. Yeah, sure enough. God's talking, he's speaking. Just try to listen better. That's something else I learned. All right, y'all, I hope this has encouraged you, if you're in a rough place, to get past it and move right on. Because I'm telling you what, life is hard. Isn't that the truth? Life is full of struggles. Sometimes you'll be on the mountaintop. Sometimes you'll be in the valley. Wherever you are, the accomplishment is getting through it. Struggle, get through it. Don't act like it's not bothering you. Go ahead and cry if you need to. But get through what you got to get through. And I guarantee you, God will meet you there. Listen, be blessed today. Be sure to subscribe, like, and share. I would so appreciate it. And I will see you next time. Bye now.